Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah, this is the 100th session of Seerah Khatam al-Nabiyyin sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And alhamdulillah, we've been talking about the battle of Khandaq, Ghazwa Khandaq or Ghazwa al-Ahzab. And just a quick review, inshallah, before we go forward. So we're talking about the Prophet had begun the groundbreaking of the Khandaq, of the digging of the trench, and how the Prophet physically himself joined the Sahaba instead of sitting back and relaxing. The Rasulullah took a mi'wal, took a pickaxe, and was alongside the Sahaba digging the trench. And we talked about how the Prophet and the Sahaba were reciting couplets of poetry as they dug, to keep them busy, to keep them going basically, and keep the enthusiasm going. They would sing couplets, and this is also something they would do when they were traveling. So the Arab would recite couplets or poetry, and this would not only themselves keep them busy while they're traveling, but the animals would sway and keep on moving to the sound of the poetry and the beautiful voice that was reciting that poetry. So Rasulullah started digging by saying Bismillahi wa bihi badina walau abadna ghayrahu shaqina ya habbadha rabban wa habbadina. That the Prophet says that in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we commence, and if we had worshipped other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would have been the people of shaqawa, or the one who would be shaqi, the one who had been doomed to the hellfire, or to the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya habbada rabban wa habbadina. And how wonderful of a Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how wonderful we have the Lord of Allah, our Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how magnificent a religion we have of Islam. So this is some of the couplets. Some more we talked about how Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh, he says that the Sahaba would say couplets like, or actually the Prophet would say couplets like, Allahumma inna al-aisha aisha al-akhirah faghfir lil-ansari wal-muhajira. That, oh Allah, there's no aish, there's no life except there's no true life except the life of the akhirah, and may Allah forgive the Ansar and the Muhajira. And the Ansar and Muhajirin would respond to the Prophet and say, نحن الذين بايعوا محمدا على الجهاد ما بقينا أبدا. That we are the ones who have given our pledge of allegiance and given bay'ah to the Prophet on jihad, ما بقينا أبدا, as long as we are alive, as long as we have breaths to take. So these are some couplets that the Prophet was responding, was reciting. Another one I recited, it was a very beautiful meaning. Wallahi lawla Allah mahtadina. If it wasn't for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we wouldn't have been given guidance or been guided. Wala tasaddaqna wala sallayna, and we wouldn't have given charity nor prayed. فَأَنزِلًا سَكِينَةً عَلَيْنَا. So send down, O Allah, send down the sakina upon us. وَثَبِّتَ الْأَقْدَامَ إِنْ لَاقَيْنَا. And if we are to meet the enemy, then make our feet firm, so we stand in battle and we are firm to meet the enemy. إِنَّ الْأُولَى قَدْ بَغَوْا عَلَيْنَا. The groups or the people have gone against us. إِذَا أَرَادُوا فِتْنَةً أَبَيْنَا. So if they wish to fight us, or they wish to put us in trial, then we reject these fitna. We reject to be put in the place of fitna. So the Prophet would respond, and he would repeat the last words of that couplet and say, Abayna, Abayna, Abayna. That we have rejected this, we have rejected this, we have rejected this. So these are some couplets. We also talked about where there were some miracles that occurred while they were digging. So we talked about the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah where there was a large boulder that was not able to be lifted or moved or broken, and the Sahaba came to the Prophet complaining about this boulder. So Rasulullah himself took the pickaxe, he said Bismillah, and he hit it. and how it lighted up. There was basically like a lightning, or you could say sparks that lighted up, and the Prophet ﷺ gave Bashara, gave glad tidings of 3 places being conquered by the Muslims. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me Syria, or Sham, not Syria but Sham, the greater Sham area, the keys of Sham basically, the palaces of Persia, and then also the doors or the gates of Yemen. So these are the 3 places that the Prophet ﷺ gave the Muslims glad tidings of, and because he was giving the glad tidings at that moment. So we talked about how the Munafiqeen started laughing and talking to each other, saying that how can he talk like this or say things when he is hungry and he's tying rocks to his stomach, and he's talking about these great superpowers of that time. But this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know that by the end of the Prophet ﷺ's life, the starting of the victories started, and then in the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq and Umar bin Khattab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had fulfilled that destiny of victory. We also talked about the miracle that happened in the 2 families who were most prominent in their self-sacrifice. So there's one thing that was correlates, or was commonality between these 2 families, is Jabir ibn Abdullah and Abu Talha al-Ansari, how they sacrificed their own desires, and they for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed these miracles that happened where they sent food, or for example they had food cooked in their house, and the Prophet ﷺ with a large group. In the case of Abu Talha, it was 70 or 80 men of the Sahaba came, and they just small pieces of bread and some butter or honey that was placed upon that to make it eatable, because the bread would be hard from drying up. So they put something on there, and the Prophet ﷺ made dua, and these 70 to 80 Sahaba were able to eat from that. Also in the case of Jabir ibn Abdullah, where a small goat and some sha'ir, some dough for bread basically, fed over 1,000 Sahaba. So these are miracles that occurred. And in regarding to this is actually a 3rd story about the daughter of Bashir ibn Sa'd radiyallahu anh. And she's also the nephew of Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiyallahu anh. The niece of Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiyallahu anh. So the sister of Abdullah radiyallahu anh was Umrah bint Rawaha radiyallahu anha. This was her daughter. She was young, and the mother had taken a handful of dates and gave it to her daughter to go to the battlefield and give it to her uncle and give it to her father. Basically, here's some dates. Go to your father, go to your uncle. They must be hungry. Take these and give it to them. So as she's walking, she said, I'm carrying these dates and I'm walking. And Rasulullah sees me, and he calls this young girl over, and he says that, what do you have with you? Like, are you carrying are you carrying food for your father? What are you carrying? And she says, yes, I'm taking some food for my father and my uncle. And Rasulullah says, so she says in her own words, she says, ثُمَّ قَالَ لِإِنسَانٍ عِنْدَهُ. So the Prophet turns to a man who was next to him, and he says, إِصْرِخْ فِي أَهْلِ الْخَندَقِ, that tell the people of Khandaq, meaning the whole entire army, أَنَّ هَلُمَّ إِلَى الْغَدَاءِ, come and eat lunch, or come and eat, basically it was lunch or breakfast at that time. They haven't eaten for days. So he says, come and eat, basically lunch. And the Prophet around him gathers the entire army. They come together, and she says that فَجَعَلُوا يَأْكُلُونَ مِنْهُ وَجَعَلَهُ يَزِيدُ. So basically the Prophet took a garment, he laid it out, and that small handful of dates, he put it on the garment, and he made dua, and they start coming, and every single one of the Sahaba started taking and eating, and it wouldn't diminish. And actually she says that it started to increase in number, and it started to even overflow basically off the sheet that was placed on the ground, and it was falling over. So this is one of the miracles that also happened in the digging, or during the digging of the trench. One thing also I want to mention was there was a hadith of Anas ibn Malik radhiallahu anhu. This is in Sahih Bukhari, where he's talking about in the beginning he talks about the irtijaz, or basically the singing of the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ while they're digging. And then he continues, he says that the Sahaba would bring basically a handful of barley, and they would bring this handful of barley, and then whatever cooking material they had left, so oil or fat or butter or whatever they had, and this would be something that would be like, leftovers basically. So it's like, even like a foul smell coming from that oil or from that, it's like old stuff, like how if we have stuff in the especially stuff that's made with butter or oil or milk, that weird taste it gets into if it's old. So they had this barley, and they would take this oil and fat, and they would cook a meal out of that, and it would be given to the workers, to the Sahaba that were there, and they would eat from that. And it said, the Anas Radhan says, it would stick to their throats. It was that coarse, and it was like, basically it was not proper meal, proper food to even eat, but that's all they had. So they would eat it, and it would stick to their throats, and it had a very nasty smell. So in the hadith, he says, وَلَهَا رِيحٌ مُنْتِنٌ, that it had a very foul stench coming from that food, but that was all they had to eat. So again, these are the sacrifices the Sahaba went through for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand that, inshallah ta'ala. And when the time comes for us to go through those sacrifices, that we're, inshallah, give us tawfiq to act in the footsteps of the Sahaba, inshallah. So, according to Ibn Sa'd, rahimahullah, he says that it took 6 days for the trench to be completed, for it to be dug, basically. And the Quraysh, when the enemy arrived, not only the Quraysh but the Ghatafan and the other tribes that were formed the 10,000 men, or this 10,000 strong army, when they came, they were astounded by seeing this trench, because they're like, this is not something that the Arab would do. This is a new tactic, and we haven't seen anything like this before. So, amazed by this, they had nothing to do but except to wait, and they trying to look, at areas where they could try to manage to get over and whatnot. And it's reported that some of the mushrikeen, after a few days or of looking and waiting and looking where they can what they can do, they actually managed to jump over the trench. So there's a famous incident where Amr ibn Abdi Wud and Ikrama ibn Abi Jahl, the son of Abu Jahl, Ikrama radiallahu anh, he later became Muslim, was not Muslim at that time, and Udirar ibn Khattab and others, they managed to find a place where it was not too wide, and they actually jumped over with their horses. So as they jumped over, and this is related by Imam al-Bayhaqi rahimahullah in the Sunan al-Kubra, he says that Amr ibn Abdul Wud, he jumped over basically, and he's on his horse, and he's saying to the Muslims, calling out to the Muslims, Man yubaris, like, who will come out and duel with me one-on-one? Who will come and fight me one-on-one? And Ali Radhan stood up, and he says, basically, like, he's ready. He's asking the Prophet permission, and he says, Ana laha ya Nabi Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm for this, or I wanna go and face this man. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Innahu Amr, this is Amr. Now Amr ibn Abdi Wud, he was famous, he was a veteran of war, he was one of the the commanders of the army. Okay, he was unbeatable one-on-one, very strong man, many years ahead of Ali Radhan in his age. Ali Radhan was in his early 20s at this time. And Amr ibn Abdul Wud, Allah Alam, I'm not sure exactly how old he was, but he was a veteran, a soldier, and he was known for his ferocity and his strength and his courage in battle. So Rasulullah said, this is Amr. It's just sit down, just wait. You're too young for this, okay? And the Amr ibn Abdul Wud continued on, and he says, Ala rajul wa huwa, basically he says that there's no man. Is there no man? أين جنتكم التي تزعمون أنه من قتل منكم دخلها. He says that, is there no man to come out to me and face me? That what happened to that Jannah you guys talk about? You guys talk about this Jannah, and that if you die, if you're martyred, you're going to go to this Jannah. So what happened to that? I thought you guys wanted to go to Jannah. Like, basically, I can help you go get there. I can send you to that Jannah. He said, Afala yabruzu ilayya rajul, is there no one to come out and face me? And Ali Radhan stood up a second time. He says, Ana ya Rasulullah, send me, let me go fight this man. And the Prophet says again, Ijlis, sit down. Now, Amr ibn Abdul Wud stands up, calls out for a third time, and he says, and he actually started calling out, and he started mentioning some poetry, praising himself and how he's unbeatable in war and whatnot. And Ali Radhan stands up and he says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm the man for this. Let me go and face this man. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Innahu Amr, this is Amr, this is not some ordinary man. Just have some patience. You're not ready for this. And Ali Radhan says, Wa in kana Amr, even if it is Amr, I don't care who it is, I'm ready for this. Ya Rasulullah, please allow me to go and fight him and face him. So the Prophet ﷺ allows him. After 3 times seeking permission, the Prophet ﷺ finally allows him to go, and the Prophet ﷺ makes dua for Ali radhiyallahu anhu. He makes dua, and now Ali radhiyallahu anhu goes forward. فَمَشَى إِلَيْهِ حَتَّى أَتَاهُ وَذَكَرَ شِعْرًا. Then also Ali radhiyallahu anhu goes forward and he starts reciting poetry, and Amr says to him, Man anta, that who are you? One of the riwayats is mentioned that he actually covered his face. And the reason was he covered his face is that he was young in age, and the ulama say that he was young in age, and this Amr probably going to say, oh, this is a young boy, go bring someone else, someone older in age. So he was initially covering his face, and he comes forward and Amr says, who are you? What's your name? Why are you covering your face, basically? And Ali uncovers his face, and Amr, and he says, I'm Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Amr ibn Abdul Wud, he says, are you, basically he says, I don't want to fight you. He says, I don't want to fight you. He says that, go bring someone else, because I knew your father. So the ulama mentioned that they were friends back in the Jahiliyyah days and in the Meccan days. Amr ibn Abdul Wud was friends with Abu Talib, the father of Ali radhiyallahu anhu. So he says, غَيْرُكَ يَبْنَ أَخِي. So he says that, you're the son of my brother, basically, or a friend of mine. So he says, other than you, bring someone else. And bring someone who is older than you. You're too young for me, bring someone else. So he says, فَإِنِّي أَكْرَهُ أَنْ أُحْرِيقَ دَمَكَ, that I don't want to spill your blood, I don't want to kill you. And Ali Radhan responds by saying, لَكِنِّي وَاللَّهِ, I swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, مَا أَكْرَهُ أَنْ أُحْرِيقَ دَمَكَ, that I don't care about spilling your blood. Meaning, I swear by Allah, I want to spill your blood. So he's saying this, and again, grabbing the attention of Amr, and his dismissal, saying you're too young. He's actually talking back to him. So now what happens? He becomes furious, and Amr ibn Abdul Wud jumps off the horse. And it's mentioned, فَغَضِبَ فَنَزَلَ وَسَلَّ سَيْفَ كَأَنَّهُ شُعْلَةُ نَارٍ, that Amr ibn Abdul Wud, he so quickly and with his ferocity and his anger, he jumped off the horse, took out his sword, like he was like a spark of fire. It was really quick in the way he basically jumped off. ثُمَّ أَقْبَلَ نَحْوَ عَلِي, so he started coming forward to Ali radha. Now he's angry. He doesn't care how old Ali radha is anymore. He doesn't care that he's the brother, the son of his friend or brother, as he called him. But he says that now he wants to kill him. So he says that the hadith says that Ali radhan came forward and they started fighting. As they started fighting, it's mentioned that the dust started coming up. And as the dust coming up, the Sahaba, they're looking, they're being anxious, like what's going to happen? Ali radhan, this young boy, you could say, against this large veteran soldier. And they're all watching to see what's going to happen, and then they hear the takbir of Ali radhan, where he says Allahu Akbar, and he actually killed Amr. In one of the narrations I've heard that he cut him basically from his shoulder all the way down to his private part. He cut him in half, and then he basically dropped to the ground. and Ali radhiyallahu anhu came back. So this is one of the narrations that occurred in the Khandaq, during the Khandaq. And one thing I want to relate to in relation to this is that Ali radhiyallahu anhu, later on, the Tabi'een, they would say, we would see Ali radhiyallahu anhu in the winter months, he would be wearing summer clothing. Like, just imagine, like in Michigan, we see when it's really cold outside, it's 0 degrees or negative degrees. The next day when it's like 20, 30 degrees, which is very cold, but you see people coming outside with shorts and t-shirts on, right? And they call it the Michigan summer, where after a cold day and it gets like changed like that. So Ali was on in the winter months, he would be wearing really thin clothing, and in the summer months he would be wearing the thick clothing, and it was vice versa basically. And the Sahaba and the people around, they would see like, how is this? How is he? Like, don't you feel cold? Like, how could you wear something so thin like this? And Ali radhiyallahu anhu says that this is the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, because the dua the Prophet ﷺ made for me on that day, because of that I am able to wear this, and it doesn't affect me. The cold doesn't affect me. Another incident that happened while the Muslims were defending the trench and defending Medina Munawwara is that there was a man excuse me, by the name of Nawfal ibn Abdullah. Nawfal ibn Abdullah from the Mushrikeen. He had intention of assassinating the Prophet ﷺ, so he most likely found an area where it was able to jump over, and he jumped over. He tried jumping over, but instead he slipped, or the horse was not able to complete the jump, so he actually fell down into the trench, and he cracked his neck and broke his neck basically, and he died on the spot. So it's narrated that initially the Prophet ﷺ asked for compensation. Like, they asked for the body, they said, send us the body back. Maybe it was an important person or whatever, Allah alam, but they asked for the body, and Rasulullah ﷺ says, no, you send diya, send money, and then we will give the carcass back. And they offered 10,000 dirhams. And in one of the riwayats comes that the Prophet ﷺ actually said to them that we have no need for this dirty body, nor we need your dirty money, so here, take it back. And they gave the body back to them. Another thing that happened during this, we talked about how the Sahaba, it was very cold at night and they were hungry, and they would dig small holes and they would go into the hole and put the shield on top, and they would be trying to get some warmth from the dirt around them. So as they're guarding the trench, and during the daytime also they would be on alert. So very little sleep, barely any food. Okay, and they're not protecting themselves. It's very cold also. So these are all different things that they were experiencing while they're guarding. Now it's mentioned that in Sahih Bukhari that Ali radhiyallahu anh, he made a dua against the kuffar. He says, Mala Allahu alayhim buyutahum wa quburahum nara. May Allah fill their houses and their graves with fire. He makes his dua against them. Kama shaghaluna an as-salat al-wusta hatta ghabat ash-shams. So one of the days while they're guarding, they prayed Salat al-Zuhr, and then either the enemy was trying to attack or they had come closer, whatever happened. So the Muslims were on alert, and they actually had to delay Asr. They missed Asr completely. It was basically the sun had set and they missed Asr. They did not pray Asr. So Ali radhiyallahu anhu made this dua against the kuffar. Another one of the days, not just one prayer but 4 prayers were prayed together. So basically, this is in Muslim Ahmad, that the kuffar were again attacking, or they were getting close to attacking, so the Muslims were on alert. And in that day, Salatul Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha were prayed together. So Salatul Zuhr, Asr, and Maghrib, these 3 prayers were basically missed completely altogether. They were not able to pray these prayers, and when Salatul Isha, time for Isha came, they prayed all 4 of these prayers together. So this is again, the difficulty of guarding Medina and the trench and what they were experiencing and going through. Now, in one of the narrations, it comes that the Prophet ﷺ, at one point, he thought that we need to lessen the enemy. This is a large army, so one thing we can do to basically, you could say, lessen the army basically, is that Banu Ghatafan, one of the large armies, one of the large tribes that had joined the kuffar in this battle, they were actually promised. You guys remember what they were promised by the Yahud?
Dates.
Yes, they were promised half the dates of that year for the produce of dates from Khaybar, from the city of Khaybar. So that's why they're basically hired guns. So they were just there for the money. They weren't there. They were mercenaries, you could say. They're there for that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gets the Sahaba together, and he says that his proposal was, why don't we try to pay them? We'll make a contract with them that we'll give them, I think it was one third of the dates of Medina, of the produce of Medina. We'll give it to them if they leave the battle, if they just leave the battle. And this way, the armies, it would be like almost half a number, more than half actually, because Banu Ghatafan had supplied about 6,000 soldiers. So that was one of the tactics the Prophet ﷺ wanted to use, and he gave this proposal to the Sahaba. He says that, what do you guys think about this? And you had the Sa'dan, the two Sa'ds of the Ansar, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh and Sa'd ibn Ubadah radhiyallahu anhuma. He asked them, what do you think about this proposal? And they asked the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, هَذَا رَأْيٌ تَخْتَارُ أَمْ وَحْيٌ أَمَرَكَ اللَّهُ بِهِ. That is this wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is this something that you are proposing and you are thinking about, and you have a choice in the matter? Which one is it? And the Prophet ﷺ says that no, this is something that I'm giving shura, and I'm thinking that we should do this. This is something that we have a choice in. So the two Sa'ds, they respond to the Prophet ﷺ, and they say that, Wallahi, we swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ما أصنع ذلك إلا لأنني رأيت العرب قد رمتكم. Sorry, this is the wording of the Prophet ﷺ. He says that basically that I'm not doing this, or I'm not proposing this, except that I see that the Arab have come in this huge army around you, and they're basically shooting arrows an qawsin wahida. They're shooting arrows from one bow. They're basically united against you. So because of this, I want to lessen their numbers, and that's why I'm proposing this. And Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radhiyallahu, he responds, he says, Ya Rasulullah, he said that we and these people, the Ghatafan, we were mushrikeen before the hidayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before Islam had come to us. He said that we were on shirk, and we were worshipping these idols, ibadat al-awthan, we were worshipping these idols. And he said, La na'bud Allah, and we did not worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point. Wala na'rifu, and we didn't even recognize who Allah, we didn't even know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was. And he says that they were not able to take from our city one date. They were not able to take one date from us, except if we were hosting them and we fed them ourselves, okay, or if they bought it from us. That was the only way they're going to get some dates from us. Okay, and this is before Islam. He's talking about before Islam. He said that they were not able to take one date from us, except either they were guests in our house, or they had bought the dates from us. Otherwise, they didn't touch our dates, and they weren't able to get one date from us. And now we have Islam in our hearts. We are Muslim, and we have Iman in our hearts. So, how is it possible that we're going to let them give this because they came and they're threatening us, or they're coming, to attack us? So, basically, how can we do this? So his rai was that we cannot do this. We cannot give this to the kuffar. And he says, Sa'd ibn Ubadah and Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, they say that we don't need this. So they say, Wallahi ma lana bihadha min haja. We don't need to do this, Ya Rasulullah. There's no need. We're ready to fight, and we're ready to basically die for the cause of Allah, to defend Medina Munawwar and defend the Prophet. And he says, Wallahi la nu'tihim illa sayf. We will not give them anything except the sword. We'll not give them any dates, but we're going to give them the sword instead. Hatta yahkum Allah baynana wa baynahum. And Allah will allow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to judge between us and them, who will win and what's going to happen. So this is the response that they give. And in one of the riwayats, as mentioned, I think it was Sa'd ibn Ubadah, one of them, he basically erases, with the permission of the Prophet ﷺ, he erases the treaty, basically what they had written up so far, and he does that. So now Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radhiyallahu anhu, on one of the days of when they were defending Medina, he comes out with his dira', with his armor, and it's mentioned that his arms were uncovered. So he had like basically like a vest on, an armor vest on, but his arms were uncovered, and he came out, and this is in Ibn Hisham, that he came out and basically they shot an arrow, and this arrow hit him on his arm, and it hit him right where his main artery basically was hit. So he was bleeding a lot because of this. And when they hit him like this, the person who had shot the arrow, his name was Ibn Urqa. Ibn Urqa or Ibn Urqa. He was the one who shot the arrow, and he says that when he hit Sa'd radhiyallahu anhu with the arrow, he says, "Khudha minni, take this from me, take this. Wa ana ibn al-Urqa, and I am the son of Urqa." So he says this, and Sa'd radhiyallahu anhu responds by saying, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh responds by saying, "Arraka Allah wajhak finnar." May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put your face in the hellfire and burn your face in the hellfire. Allahumma in kunt, and then he made a dua. And this is a very important dua. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh radhiyallahu anhu, he makes his dua to Allah. So he knew that this is a very serious wound. It hit my artery, and this is going to be very difficult to recover from. So he knew that death is imminent. But he makes a dua. He says, "Oh Allah, Allahumma in kunta abqayta min harbi Quraysh shay'an." So if you are going to allow this to, be with, lengthened further. If you're going to allow this battle to be lengthened further, فَأَبْقِنِي لَهَا. So allow me to live until the end, at least until the end of the battle. So let me allow me to live until the end of the battle. فَإِنَّهُ لَا قَوْمَ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِنْ أَنْ أُجَاهِدَهُمْ فِيكَ مِنْ قَوْمٍ آذَوْا نَبِيَّكَ وَكَذَّبُوهُ وَأَخْرَجُوهُ. He says that there is no people that I want to fight more than these people that harmed the Prophet ﷺ. وَكَذَّبُوهُ, and they denied him, they falsified the Prophet ﷺ. وَأَخْرَجُوهُ, and they also forced him out of Makkah. So these are the people, these Quraysh, I want to fight them, so at least allow me to live until the end of the battle, so I can see the end of this battle and we can fight against this kuffar. And he goes on to say, Allahumma in kunta wadat al-harb baynana wa baynahum faj'alha li shahada. And if we are going to basically lose, or basically this battle, allow me to have shahada. Give me shahada from this battle. And then the Prophet, Sa'd radhiyallahu goes on to say, وَلَا تُمِتْنِي حَتَّى تَقِرَّ عَيْنِي مِنْ بَنِي قُرَيْظَةَ. And he adds on to that do not allow me to die until I see myself and my eyes are cooled by seeing the adhab and the punishment of Banu Qurayza. And this is obviously after Banu Qurayza had done their treachery. So we'll talk about that next week, inshallah. But the treachery of Banu Qurayza, where they actually go against, they betray the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts that dua, and we'll talk about, inshallah, towards the end of the battle, where Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, not only does he live until the end of the battle, he actually goes to Banu Qurayza. So when they go and they surround Banu Qurayza after the end of the battle, after the Quraysh and Qatafan and all of them have left, Banu Qurayza was left, and they had closed down their fortresses and hid inside, and the Muslims went there. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was one of those who had witnessed the punishment that is given to Banu Qurayza. So we'll talk about that inshallah at the end, but we'll continue on next week with the khiyana, or the treachery of Banu Qurayza, and how that occurred. Jazakallah khair. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.